Good evening. I'm Kelda Yoon. Two Toronto police officers who face misconduct charges in the case of a missing woman from 2017 have had their charges dropped. Tess Ritchie's body was found by her mother in the Church and Wellesley area, just 40 meters from where she was reported missing just 4 days earlier. Greg Ross was at the hearing for the officers this morning and has the details.
This is the area near Church and Wellesley where Tess Ritchie went missing nearly 7 years ago. And now we finally know the outcome of a tribunal into the conduct of officers who were assigned to her case all those years ago after a hearing at police headquarters this morning. This was an incredibly quick hearing. It lasted less than 10 minutes. And the reason for that is the two officers involved were able to come to an agreement with prosecutors on a settlement. Toronto Police Constable Alan McCullough and Constable Michael Jones were originally charged with neglect of duty and insubordination for their handling of the disappearance of 22-year-old Tess Ritchie. Ritchie went missing in November of 2017. She was out clubbing one night here in the Gay Village when she met Kaylin Schlater outside of one of the bars. Schlater led Ritchie down this stairwell right here, and it was down that stairwell where he sexually assaulted her and strangled her. Schlater has since been convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Ritchie had been missing for several days before her body was discovered down that stairwell by her mother, just steps from the location where she was last seen. Officers McCullough and Jones had conducted a search of this area several days before Ritchie's body was found. And I remember talking to the family back then in 2017, and they expressed that they didn't believe police were doing enough to find Tess Ritchie, which is why they went out and conducted their own search, which inevitably led to Tess Ritchie's mother making that gruesome discovery, finding her daughter's body down that stairwell. Today, Constables McCullough and Jones both agreed to accept responsibility. In turn, the charges against them were withdrawn in favor of a restorative approach to discipline. So they're going to be disciplined at the unit level, and both will be docked 40 hours of pay. They have both agreed to contribute to improving police service training in the area of missing persons. They say that they will work with new recruits and share the lessons that they've learned through all of this. Now, we did get a statement today from Tess Ritchie's sister, Rachel Ritchie. She says that she's happy that the officers are accepting responsibility for their shortcomings in the search for Tess. She went on to say that the fact that the charges have been withdrawn means that the family can avoid further legal proceedings, which she says provides some relief. But not everyone in the family is feeling that relief, according to lawyer Mike Schmidtchuk, who represents the family.
The mother of Tess Ritchie, Christine Hermiston, is not satisfied with what happened and would like more answers about, how this could have happened in the first place, and would like more accountability. And so ultimately, the fight for justice for Tess Ritchie continues, and it will continue in the form of a civil lawsuit, which includes the two officers as defendants.
So it took nearly 7 years from the time that Ritchie went missing to get this outcome. And one of the reasons for that is after Schlater was convicted in 2020, he appealed that conviction. Earlier this year, that appeal was dismissed by the Ontario Court of Appeals, and that paved the way for this tribunal to conclude this morning. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Toronto police are continuing their search for a man suspected of murdering two women in Etobicoke last week. The women, who are both related to the suspect, were found in a home near the East Mall and Evans Avenue. Tyler Cheese has the latest.
Police say they were called to this home on Silvercrest Avenue to do a well-being check around 1 p.m. on Friday. When they arrived, officers found two victims, an 82-year-old and a 60-year-old.
Officers responded to the area and attended a home where they located two females suffering from injuries. Unfortunately, those females were beyond help, and those females were pronounced on the scene.
The nature of the injuries has not been released. Police are searching for this man, 33-year-old Joseph Ayala, on a charge of second-degree murder.
Yes, Mr. Ayala is a relative of the two deceased. That's all I'm able to tell you at this time.
This weekend, neighbors told CBC News Ayala is the son and grandson of the two victims and that they all lived in the same house together.
I'm very shocked. Very shocked. Like nothing has ever happened on this street, so I'm just totally shocked.
As the search for Ayala continues, police have released these images. He's described as 5'11" with a shaved head. He's known to wear a cowboy hat, black cowboy boots, and a jacket with tassels on the sleeve.
We suggest that he finds a lawyer and surrenders to police with that lawyer as soon as possible.
Police are asking anyone who sees Ayala to call 911 and say not to approach him directly. They're also urging anyone who may know where he is to contact them immediately. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
Durham police are warning the public of a rise in fraudulent ticket sales in the region, including sales of fake Taylor Swift tickets for her upcoming concert.
We're seeing a variety of tickets for different events and concerts, but I will say that the Taylor Swift concert coming to Toronto, obviously she's such a large name, so there's going to be quite the outpour for wants of those tickets. And unfortunately, as a result, we're going to see scammers trying to fill that void to provide those fraudulent tickets. They're going to take advantage of that.
Police say scammers are selling the fraudulent tickets for much cheaper than market value through Facebook Marketplace. In some cases, they hack accounts and pose as a person who knows the victim. Police have included a list of common scams on their website, and they are asking anyone who believes they are a victim of a scam to contact them. Airport parking provider Park and Fly says the personal information of 1 million customers was accessed in a data breach. Names, emails, and mailing addresses were compromised between July 11th and 13th, but not payment information. Affected customers have been contacted by Park and Fly. Contract talks between Air Canada and its pilots are at a critical stage. The federal conciliation process between the airline and the union representing its pilots ends today. There is now a 21-day cooling off period. After that, the 5,400 pilots will be in a legal strike position starting September 17th. Last week, the pilots gave their union an overwhelming strike mandate. The two sides have been negotiating a new contract since June of last year. Among the key issues are wages, scheduling, and retirement benefits. GO trains are once again moving on Metrolinx's Milton line after work stoppages at Canada's two major freight railways disrupted service last week. Work resumed today after the Federal Labor Board ordered all rail employees back. Ali Chiasson has the latest.
As full train service gets back up and running, delays are still possible, but it is nothing like we saw late last week when 10,000 GO train commuters were sent scrambling. That's when 9,300 rail workers, including train conductors and engineers, were locked out by CN and CPKC Rail when talks broke down with their union. They were bargaining a new collective agreement when they reached a stalemate. But with rail transit being as essential as it is, back to work legislation was granted, which meant morning commuter trains have been arriving, albeit 30 minutes late in some cases. I spoke with commuters today about the whole ordeal.
I understand they have reasons for the strike, but then, yeah, this last minute, pulling the plugs off in the last minute is not very helpful for, thousands of people for whom the only way is to get to downtown is through these trains.
I think it's difficult for both sides. This is such an essential service and it affects so many people. I can only hope that the binding arbitration process is fair and even-handed with both sides and that both sides can feel heard.
This is essentially a microcosm of the situations in other industries, and we can see in a lot of places that people feel like their wages aren't catching up with inflation or being suppressed in some way, and it's important again to show support for our fellow workers.
We just saw some of those commuters call Ubers and drive on out of here because it turns out their train was delayed by an hour, not for any labor dispute, but because of a signal issue affecting the rail corridor here along the Hamilton GO line. So if it's not one issue, it's another. Also, the union representing the rail workers is appealing the back-to-work legislation, so we are not out of the tunnel yet. It is a good idea to check that train schedule, even more often than you might already do, before heading out to the station. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Mississauga.
Another busy downtown corridor will see streetcars be replaced by buses beginning next Tuesday. The TTC announcing its 509 Harbourfront streetcar will join the 510 Spadina in being out of commission for the next several months as it makes upgrades to its network. While this has many daily commuters shaking their heads, an exception has been made for Taylor Swift fans. Anam Khan explains.
Another busy streetcar route closing for maintenance next week.
Oh my God, I'm mortified.
I've already accepted it.
The TTC announcing the 509 Harbourfront streetcar route is closing for 4 months between Harbourfront Tunnel and Strachan Avenue while it works on modernizing the power network system on Queens Quay and Fleet Street, a route that spans 3 kilometers.
We're expecting 60 new streetcars, and of course, more streetcars means more of a power draw. So we have to upgrade those overhead systems to accommodate the growth of the TTC streetcar fleet.
The work expected to be completed in 3 stages. The first, between the Harbourfront Tunnel and Spadina Avenue. Buses will replace streetcars. The second stage, focusing on upgrades between Spadina and Bathurst, beginning in October. Some streetcar service will be restored at this time. Then the third stage, beginning in November, will see the completing of overhead work west of Bathurst Street, along Fleet Street. The TTC says it will replace the 509 streetcars with buses just like it did with the Spadina streetcar 2 months ago. But Taylor Swift, look what you made the TTC do.
Look what you made me do. Look what you made me do.
For the Swifties out there, the TTC is making an exception for you, saying it's going to be restoring service when she visits in November, even increasing service to accommodate the large crowds.
Which of course is extremely important because it's bringing a lot of people to the city, and we don't want to anger the Swifties.
TTC reminding commuters that traffic will move fast because unlike the Spadina buses, the 509 replacement buses can use the streetcar right-of-way.
So we can get those cars out of, or get the buses out of mixed traffic. So the service along Queens Quay should be reliable. It'll certainly be frequent because, of course, to replace streetcars, we have to run about 3 buses.
The city saying this is all part of its long-term plan to enhance transportation, investing $200 million to expand the TTC's fleet of fully accessible low-floor streetcars. Adam Khan, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. Advocates for supervised drug consumption sites aren't backing down in their fight against the Ford government's decision to close 10 sites early next year. But the Premier is standing firm on his plan to add more drug treatment sites instead. Queen's Park reporter Lorena Redekop has the latest.
So we start with the least intervention required.
Today at a safe consumption site in Moss Park, a community open house. It's not one set to be closed by the provincial government, as it's more than 200 meters from any school or daycare.
So folks will come in here with their own drugs. We have our cookers, our water, we have ties available so that they can easily access their veins.
It's an attempt to bring the public on side on this controversial issue.
I think that most people don't know what it's like to be in a supervised consumption space, and because some people have been referring to them as drug dens when actually they're healthcare centers.
Closing the safe consumption sites is personal for this group of outreach workers who came to Queen's Park. They've seen people who've died from drug overdoses and say the government's treatment plan will lead to more deaths.
When a forest fire ravages through a community, we don't take away firefighters. When someone is drowning, we wouldn't tell the lifeguard to come off duty. And here we are, closing the same things that keep people alive.
This government needs to walk back this deadly announcement and stop playing political football with people's lives. These cuts will kill.
The government is closing 10 sites while adding money for 19 homelessness and drug treatment hubs. The change comes following the fatal shooting of Caroline Hubner-Macarat, killed near the South Riverdale Community Health Centre, though 2 government-commissioned reports did not recommend closing it.
I'm quite proud of what we're doing.
Today, the Premier defended his plan and says he doesn't agree with the federal government's Safer Supply program, giving people prescription medication instead of them using street drugs.
I compare it to giving people poker chips, dropping them off in front of the casino and saying go to town, or give them a free pass to LCBO all day, all night. That doesn't work, folks. I know. I've dealt with it within our family.
When Doug Ford says that, we're not making policies off the basis of our own families. We're making policies off of evidence, and we need to be using that evidence.
And she says that in the 6 years Ford has been in power, the drug crisis has worsened. Overdose deaths jumped from 2 a day to 9.
The goal is that we've seen Ford walk back on things, and he needs to walk this back.
They hope they can build a larger resistance to make the government change its mind. Lorena Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
The Canadian government has announced it's imposing a 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles. It's meant to protect the Canadian industry that's just getting started from the much more advanced one in China. But as Nisha Patel reports, consumers will feel what that means in the price they pay.
Charge limit set to 90%.
At this electric vehicle dealership in Oakville, Ontario, it's clear what buyers are looking for.
The more options out there, the more competition, and maybe the better rates and better deals.
But the federal government's steep new 100% tariff is designed to make Chinese-made EVs less attractive.
Now, if it's going to be quite literally double the price, no one's going to buy it.
Ottawa's move is meant to protect EV manufacturing here at home and the billions of taxpayer dollars invested in the emerging industry. Automakers say this will buy them some time to shift into high gear.
We can build up this EV supply chain, and Canada can secure its role in the transformation to electric that is taking place globally in the automotive industry.
The most immediate hit will be to Tesla, which builds EVs for the Canadian market in Shanghai. Though the company could avoid the import tax by shifting production to a different country. Still, it's Chinese brands like BYD that are seen as the greatest threat. Experts say they ignore environmental and labor standards and are heavily subsidized by the government, giving them an unfair advantage.
It's very important for us to have a level playing field. The Chinese are very good at what they do, but what they do also includes breaking the rules.
In China, the BYD Seagull sells for the equivalent of $13,000. In an overseas market like Mexico, a similar BYD model costs $25,000. In Canada, one of the cheapest EVs available is the Fiat 500e. Built in Italy, it's priced here at more than $42,000.
Building a plant in the U.S. or Canada would be beneficial to BYD. We fully expect something to be announced for Canada or a quick growth of a plant that they plan in Mexico.
The new rules will be in place for at least a year, but they likely can't keep companies like BYD away for good. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. A former Toronto Blue Jay is heading to the Hall of Fame, but not in the way you might think. Catcher Danny Jansen was in the lineup for the Jays on June 26 in a game against the Boston Red Sox. Well, that game was rained out, and a month later, he was traded to the Red Sox. The game resumed today, which meant Jansen suiting up for both teams in the same game, the only Major League player to ever do so. Dale Manukduk has the story.
That's Danny Jansen on the scoreboard at Fenway Park in a Jays uniform.
It looks a little strange.
That's Jansen on the field in a Red Sox kit. What is going on?
Up until recently was just, and I'll say, run-of-the-mill player. You know, he was a ball player that was on no one's radar. Now all of a sudden everybody wants to see him catch and hit for two different teams in the same game.
Danny Jansen was at the plate.
Flashback to June 26, Jansen was batting for the Jays when the game was rained out. On July 27th, Boston acquired him. And today they finished out the game with Jansen behind home plate for the Sox, catching against Dalton Varsho, who pinch hit Jansen's own at-bat for Toronto.
Jansen popped up to Horwitz at first base in his first at-bat against his old team.
It marks the first time a Major League Baseball player has suited up for both teams in the same game. Here's what Jansen told reporters on Sunday.
Definitely cool, definitely grateful for the opportunity to be in that position. One of those, crazy things about this game, and definitely an oddity.
The game's scorecard will make its way to the Baseball Hall of Fame. It tells CBC Toronto this scorecard will be a great tool to document and illustrate this history, showing Danny Jansen's name on both teams.
It's pretty fitting that Jano will be the first guy to do that. He's that kind of guy. It's weird stuff happens to him.
This is his 16th game with the Red Sox.
While Jansen is the first MLB player this has happened to, he's not the first baseball player.
It's the second time it's happened for the Blue Jays. So back in 1986, there was a guy by the name of Dale Holman who was an outfielder, and he played for both the Syracuse Chiefs and the Richmond Braves in the same game. And what happened was the game was begun in June of 1986, and then the game got suspended due to rain, and it was resumed on August the 16th. But by that time, Holman had been released by the Braves, and then he was signed by Atlanta. And right before that game was to be resumed, he got promoted to Atlanta's AAA team, just in time for a resumed game.
For a game with so much history, Jansen is walking into Cooperstown. It might not be the old-fashioned way, but a memento with his name will be under the same roof as many of the legends of the sport.
And a liner into center. That's a base hit.
Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
Finally tonight, celebrating a birthday is usually a piece of cake for most people, but not for Manette Bailey. This British woman decided to set herself a high goal for turning 102 years old. It meant jumping out of a plane from 7,000 feet to become Britain's oldest skydiver. And it's not just for the thrill of it. She's using the jump to raise money for charities that are dear to her. Bailey served with the Women's Royal Navy Service during the Second World War. She says despite having married a paratrooper, this is her first time skydiving. Incredible. And that is our show for you tonight.